I live in Melbourne, Australia, western suburbs, in the bad part of town. I don't have a car, so I rely on public transportation. I went to go see a friend who lives literally downtown. I live 9 stations away from there. I got to the station at 11 p.m. I'm a male, 28 years old, and don't usually worry about walking at night and stuff like that. The walk home from the station is about 25 minutes up a main road. Then I turn off into my road and walk a bit further. As I'm walking down the main road, I notice someone who is walking behind me a bit further away from me. I thought nothing of it. He was just the only one around since it was late on a weekday. I kept track of him, and he bolted towards me, then stopped and did some strange mannerisms, like with his hands. I can't describe it. Then he stopped again, just standing there. I was so scared and started to walk faster to get home. As I got to the point of me having to walk in my street, I was thinking, for the love of Christ, please still don't be following me. But my heart sank to the floor when I also saw him turn the corner. I bolted as fast as I could, but he caught up to me. I was frozen in fear. He was wearing camo pants and a black hoodie covering his whole face. He was honestly the creepiest man I've ever seen when he took off his black mask that he was wearing. He never hurt me, but he said, "I've been watching you for a while. You shouldn't walk around at night. Next time, I won't be so forgiving." He did this with a strange facial expression, jumped up and down, and then bolted away. I made it home, and I was so scared that I called my dad, and he told me to never walk home at night again, especially that late at night. I told him that I always do it, and he just replied with, "I should know better." I'm happy he didn't find the house I live in, because when he caught up to me, I was about halfway there. I'm not going to walk home at night ever again. I used to be employed as a child protective worker. A report came through. I was given the investigation by my team leader. When I interviewed the oldest child with the police, she had visible physical injuries and told me exactly what happened. I'll spare the details, but it's horrific. As a child was in his sole care, we knew they needed to be removed immediately. We sent a team of workers out to the child's school while myself and my colleague called the stepfather into the office. I led the interview, and it was horrible. He didn't even try to deny that he had hurt his stepchild, basically saying, "That's my kid. I'll do whatever I want, and you can't stop me." When I served him with the paperwork, he absolutely lost his mind. He was swearing and screaming and said, "If we were outside the building right now, I would fucking kill you." We ended up running out of the interview room, pressing the emergency alarm, and even had to make a police report about the whole thing. It got really messy. The next day, we were in court for the children, and my manager decided I shouldn't attend due to everything that happened the previous day. My colleagues who attended told me that the man was at court and yelled several times something to the effect of, "Where's that bitch of a worker who took my kids?" I remember feeling a little freaked out, but it's not uncommon to hear things similar to this when you have removed a child. It's understandable that emotions are very high. You build a little resilience working in the field. And overall, I mainly felt relief that these children were placed with their aunt and were safe. About 2 weeks later, I had stayed back late in the office on an unrelated job. It was 9 p.m. when I finished, and I was the only person there. I walked out the back of the building to my car. It was really dark, but when I got close, I thought I saw a shadow moving in front of my car, just for a second, and then it was gone. I was about 20 meters away at this point, but it startled me. I stood there for a second, looking at my car, wondering if I was just being paranoid. While staring into the darkness, I started hearing rustling noises, and whether imagined or not, all the true crime horror stories I've ever heard flashed into my mind. Safe to say, I freaked myself out and sprinted back to the building. I called my boyfriend to come pick me up, explaining what just happened. By the time he drove up to the front doors, I had convinced myself that I was just being silly and asked him to drive me around to my car. He circled around with his headlights shining in the car and I could very clearly see that all 4 of my tires had been slashed. I was an absolute mess that night and called the police immediately. I was pretty sure that this man was responsible for it, but I had not seen him, so I couldn't say for sure. I took a few days off and came back to a meeting with my manager, who had put together a safety plan for me and the other staff. She organized for security guards to escort us out to our car and said very clearly that no one was to stay in this building after hours alone. Then about a week later, a letter was delivered to the office addressed to me. Any mail that comes into our office goes through the reception staff. Our lovely receptionist opened it, and it was a note that said, "You're good as dead, bitch." The words were typed and printed. She was an older woman and burst into tears when she read it. It didn't say who had sent it, but I'm convinced that it's the same man. Over the next few weeks, letters kept coming in, each one getting longer. They addressed me as bitch or homewrecker, saying that I kidnapped and abused children. It was horrible stuff. The threats in the letters were the worst. The person writing them threatening to rape, torture, kill, and find out where I live and burn down the entire building. To be honest, the police were less than helpful. They basically said that given the nature of our work, they couldn't conclusively say that it was the man, although they had questioned him. To me, it seemed like a pretty massive coincidence. I had never had anything happen like this before. They did say that they were taking every letter very seriously and tracking down where they were posted from, but I never heard anything back about that. My workplace took these threats seriously too. All of the security was bumped up across the building, and all staff completed refresher training on emergency management. One day on the way home from work, I noticed a car was following me. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, so I drove down a bunch of little streets, doubling back on the same route in the way that made absolutely no sense. Even after all that, the dark green Camry was still placed a little way behind me. I freaked out, but I already planned in my head what I would do in this situation. I headed straight to the police station, pulled right in front of the building, and beat my horn until I had someone's attention. The second I pulled into the police station, the green Camry drove past and disappeared down a nearby street. I sat there for a good 20 minutes, scared to get out of my car in case they came back around the corner. It dawned on me that in my panic, I had forgotten to take down the license plate number. This upsets me to this day. I told the police what I knew, but they told me that the man didn't have any car registered in his name. This was the last straw for me. I was a nervous wreck. I was looking around constantly at work and at home. I knew that he lived relatively close to me, so I even stopped going grocery shopping in case I ran into him. I stayed on stress leave for a month and heard from my colleagues that the letters kept arriving. I was honestly ready to quit, but then COVID happened. It really changed everything. Everyone went into lockdown and all access to the office were restricted. I started back working from home, driving a work car to and from appointments. I didn't go into the office regularly anymore, only allowed in small work groups when absolutely necessary. Over the next year, the letters slowed and eventually stopped. By the time we were allowed to go back into the office, there weren't any signs of this man for almost 7 months. About a year later, I left child protection. I don't know what happened with those children, but my hope is that they're happy and safe with their family. This happened over 10 years ago, so excuse me if some of the details are a little fuzzy. When I was in high school, my friend Claire came to a sleepover. We had plans to sneak out and hang out with some guys, and then one of them would drive us home. We got out of my friend's apartment, have some fun, and around midnight, we decided it's time for us to head back. But when we asked to be taken back, everyone says no, despite previously agreeing to bring us back. Everyone said that they were either too drunk or too high. So we eventually decided to just start walking back and would make some phone calls to see if anyone could pick us up and bring us the rest of the way. My house was a good 20 minutes away by car on the highway, so there was no way that we were walking all the way back. The apartment that we were partying at was towards the back of the complex, so we start making our way to the entrance. We don't even get halfway there before a car starts slowly rolling up behind us. I was 15 or 16 at the time and very naive to the ways of the world back then, so I wasn't too concerned. But Claire was a little smarter than me on this night. She tells me to start walking faster, so we start walking faster. The car picks up their pace behind us. Again, she tells me to walk faster. We start moving as fast as we can, and that's when the car pulled slightly in front of us, and 2 of the passenger doors opened, and 2 men got out. Realizing that there is no walking faster to get out of this situation, she instructs me, "Run now." So she takes off running, and I follow her. She runs towards a group of parked cars and jumps behind the pickup truck. For a minute, we prayed that we weren't spotted. This is where details get a little fuzzy. One of them must have gotten back in the car at some point, as there's only one of them following us behind the truck. We hear footsteps quickly approaching. Claire quietly indicates that we're going into stealth mode. This man is on the other side of the truck that we're hiding behind. He's circling the truck looking for us, and we're slowly and quietly circling on the opposite side to avoid being spotted. It felt like a scene from a movie or video game. We somehow managed to do 2 or 3 circles around the vehicle without being detected, and by the grace of the gods, he gives up and decides to go back to the car with his friends. This is our one shot to get away. She tells me to run again, so we run for what felt like an eternity, but was probably more around 15 to 20 seconds. We find a pool house area and spot a place to hide. We are hidden behind some fences and bushes, and we're anxiously waiting to see if they discover us. Their car pulls up to the pool house, and we're biting our nails, hoping that they don't stop and get out. The car slowly drives away, and we realize that we haven't been spotted. We were safe for now. But the car circled around the apartment complex for hours and hours. They weren't giving up on looking for us. We were safe for the time being, but we needed to find a way out of there. It was in the middle of winter, and of course we were dressed to impress the guys that we were hanging out with. So short shorts and revealing tops. We were freezing. We found a disgusting Captain America blanket that we huddled under while making phone calls to some of our friends to pick us up. We tried contacting the guy from the apartment, but no one answered our calls. None of our friends answered our calls either. We felt completely alone and hopeless. Around 5 a.m., someone finally answered and said that they would pick us up. The best news I have ever heard in my life. Our friend gets to the apartment complex, but can't find the pool house. The group of men are still constantly circling around, but there's no way we're coming out of hiding. We managed to figure out where our friend is with a little detective work, figuring out the building that they're facing was in front of them, and are there dumpsters nearby, etc. We figure out where they are and make a run for it. We spot their car and hop in as fast as we can. "Go, go, go," we tell them, and our friend speeds off towards the entrance. We pass a group of men on our way out, and that's the last we saw of them. We make it back around 6 a.m., just in time to sneak in without my parents ever knowing that we had left. If Claire hadn't been with me that night, I definitely would have been abducted, raped, or possibly killed. So thankful for Claire and her friend that picked us up, but a big fuck you to the adult men who we went to hang out with as teenagers, and especially fuck you to the guys who attempted to harm us. On a happier note, I am now very diligent and aware of my surroundings, and we washed that dirty Captain America blanket and shared custody of it for years after the encounter. I live in a city in the Midwest and was hanging out at my friend's house one night. As I was leaving, it was dark, probably 10 or 11 at night. I'm a small woman and look a lot younger than I am, and so I have experienced quite a few creepy encounters, sadly. This one still makes me nervous. I walk to my vehicle, which is parked on the right end of the sidewalk, and get in. I live about 4 minutes away, so I'm kind of on autopilot. I never noticed anything until the SUV behind me seems like they are making the same turns. Sometimes I get paranoid that people are following me though, and continue to drive. I assume they'll turn at any moment, as they often do. Except when I pull into my driveway, they pull across the end. They block me in. I'm terrified at this point, so I call my husband inside and stay in my car. He walks to the door and they pull away. I still wonder why they followed me home and what would have happened if I was alone. I just got off work. Today I worked 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Around 10:45, a man walks in. I've previously had odd encounters with this man, such as seeing him walk behind me around my neighborhood and him hang out near my street. I had brushed those off since I live right next to where I worked and figured he probably lived there, but always kept an eye on him. Anyway, this man comes in and orders his usual pastry. I work in a bakery, and tells me I'm going to stay inside and eat my pastry. For anyone who doesn't know, my country is currently under lockdown because of coronavirus, and all dining indoors is strictly prohibited. Not to mention my bakery is tiny, and there has never been any tables to sit inside, only a coffee bar that has never had space to sit in. I tell him, we're on lockdown, you can't really eat inside. His response chills me. Are you alone here? Yes, I responded stupidly, but quickly tried to catch myself. But my coworker will be here soon. A complete lie. It's about 11 a.m. and my coworker isn't scheduled until about 1 p.m. when I'm off. Then no one will see me in here, he responds, and goes back to eating his pastry at the coffee counter. I roll my eyes and go back to work, not getting paid enough to care if he quickly eats his pastry and leaves. 10 minutes pass, then 15. This guy is still in my bakery. I look over and he's finished his pastry and is moving closer to the open space in the counter meant for employees to walk back and forth between the front of the store and the employees only side. Now I start to get uncomfortable. I quickly text my coworker, a 30-year-old man who owns a lot of guns and treats me like a little sister. I look over and notice man's even closer and is now reading a book and is peeking at me from above it, watching me. Multiple customers come in and out during his stay. Every time I turn my back to him, he gets closer and closer, until eventually he's halfway into our employees only area. I begin frantically texting my coworker, and he tells me that he's 4 minutes away. I finally make the decision to text my boyfriend. I avoided doing this so to keep from scaring him, but now I was terrified. I sat in the back of the employees area watching this guy. I held a knife just in case he decided to come any closer. Just as he takes a step closer, my coworker bursts through the door. A confrontation ensues, and the man leaves the shop, but continues to sit in his parked car right in front and stares at me. I tell my coworker about the previous experiences I've had with him, and he's had enough. He marches out to the guy's car and tells the man the next time he comes around, it will be his last. My boyfriend pulls up at this point and joins in with a warning. So Matthew, aka my stalker, let's not meet again. I'm really writing this out as a way to vent because I'm in a situation where I feel really stuck. Any advice is appreciated, but I'm not sure there's anything that can be said that will actually help. I've tried just about everything. I'm going to start from the beginning. This is a story 2 years in the making, and I'll try to be as thorough as possible. In 2019, I graduated with a master's degree and moved to a relatively rural area for my PhD. Thinking we would make an investment, my dad and I purchased a house. The intent was to rent it out once I completed my PhD. This house was only a block away from a dive bar, where my dad was able to make pretty good friends. He introduced me to everyone, and everyone let me know that I would be so happy in my new house, because the next door neighbor was the absolute nicest guy you could ever meet. So we met the neighbor, and he just seemed nice enough. He suggested that we exchange numbers just in case I ever needed anything, and I thought it was a good idea. What's the worst that could happen? A few days later, my dad left to go back to his home in another state. I was left to my own devices. Literally, the day that he left, it started. My neighbor texted me while I was away and let me know that he left a gift for me on my front porch. In this text exchange, he started using the pet names like Sweetie and Cutie. I went home and he had left a hand-painted feeding dish for my cat in my mailbox. At this point, I wasn't that alarmed. He was just being nice, I thought. The next day, he sent me more texts with pet names, and I took this opportunity to make sure he knew that I was not interested in anything romantic. He replied back with a rambling text about how all a person ever needs is a friend, and he would like to be friends with me. After that, he would send me texts frequently, everything from inviting me to fishing to telling me that he left more gifts on my porch. I would often not reply or tell him I was busy. I didn't want to be rude, but I also had no interest in any sort of a relationship with him, other than neighborly. One night, I got a text from the manager of the bar down the street, letting me know that if my neighbor knocked on my door, I shouldn't answer. She then told me that my neighbor had walked down to the bar with a hatchet and told the bartender that he was hearing voices that were getting louder as he got closer to the bar. He threatened to kill someone with a hatchet if the voices didn't stop. They called the police and the police took the hatchet from him, but made no arrest. The manager from the bar picked me up and I spent the night at her house. She told me that the police said that the neighbor was on meth. After that, I tried to distance myself even more, but things got even weirder. One day, I went outside to my car to find a dead squirrel in my driveway. The squirrel had very clearly been run over and moved right in front of my driver's side door. I stepped over it, got in my car, and left. When I returned, the squirrel was gone. Shortly after, I received a text from my neighbor that said, "Someone or something put a dead squirrel in your driveway. Don't worry, I moved it for you." I felt like this was a weird way to word this, and I suspected that he was the one who put the squirrel in my driveway. Another time, I walked out of my house to see he had placed an unspent shotgun shell on a brick in his front yard. He came out and told me that this was to serve as a warning for anyone walking between our houses. For the next couple months, I did my best to avoid him. He would text me inviting me over, and I would come up with excuses or just ignore him completely. I wanted to remain cordial since he was my neighbor, but it was getting very annoying and I was uncomfortable. He would text me as soon as I got home, which told me that he was watching me come and go from my house. Around Halloween, he handcrafted a large casket and wrote, "Here lies the son of a bitch who played mind games, November 2012. What the fuck? All this time, sending me texts. Eventually, I got fed up and stopped responding completely. Less than 2 weeks after I stopped responding, he threw a 50-pound flower pot at my front door. You know, those big concrete planters. Yeah, one of those. I called the police, who advised me to get a stalking, no contact order. A few days later, I was watching TV when a notification popped up that my neighbor was trying to cast a video to my screen. I declined it twice. I filed another report with the police. During this time, I started the process of getting a stalking no contact order. I saw 3 different victims advocates who all told me different things. I went out of town for a conference, and during this time, someone had attempted breaking into my home. I had an ADT security system, so while they didn't succeed, I was aware of the attempt. After the conference, I came home to the entire world shutting down because of COVID. I was trapped in my home 24/7 with my stalker neighbor next door. Luckily, court proceedings for protection orders did not stop. Right before court, he sent me a text telling me that he was sorry for what he had done, that he could tell when he saw me outside that he made me uncomfortable. Then went on to tell me that he could tell that my hair had got longer and that I looked beautiful. I went to court and provided all the evidence I had, the timeline of everything that had ever happened. The text he sent me asking if I wanted a massage. The text I sent to him telling him that the way that he was speaking to me was inappropriate. The text saying that he knew he made me feel uncomfortable. I told the judge that I expected he attempted to break into my house while I was out of town. The kicker is, he didn't deny any of it. Actually, he told the judge that he took full accountability for everything. He said that he was in recovery and trying to turn over a new leaf. He said he didn't oppose the protection order at all. So, in March 2020, I actually received the stalking no contact order. Everything was pretty quiet for a while. I mean, he did do some weird shit, but that's because he's a weird guy. It wasn't anything that made me fear for my safety. That's until he got on drugs again. This time, we found an unspent shotgun casing in my flower bed. It was consistent with the one that he had previously used to send a warning. This occurred a couple months after I started dating my boyfriend, and I suspect it was a warning to him. After this, and for a variety of reasons, my boyfriend moved in with me. He moved in pretty quickly, but everything turned out fine. We're still together and as happy in our relationship as we can be. New Year's 2021, I was awoken to yelling. I turned on my security cameras and got footage of him sticking his head out of his window and screaming obscenities at my bedroom window for about 7 minutes. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when your stalker is screaming threats and obscenities, 7 minutes can be a long time. He called me a harlot. He said, "Happy fucking New Year." He said that he was gonna blow up his house with a gas line. I called the police, who responded. They told me that he never said my name, so they can't prove that he was in violation of the protection order. The officer said, and I quote, "There's nothing illegal about yelling in your own house." They left without speaking to him. All I could do at this point was do my best to avoid him. I parked on the street because my driveway is pretty close to his front porch. I got used to living with my curtains drawn. I always made sure that the cameras were charged, all 5 of them. Yes, because of him, I spent over $1,000 on cameras. Every inch of my yard was covered. Since then, he has been seen by other neighbors, talking to people who aren't there, going outside and screaming nonsense. Things like, "I have Cheerios on my necklace," or, "I'll put my penis in your butt." I'm not even joking. This basically brings me to last week. In the morning, I was getting ready for the day when I heard screaming, "Someone is gonna die over this sweatshirt." I turned on the cameras. I got footage of him walking around the alley behind my house screaming, "Are you fucking proud? How about I get my shotgun? I'll get everyone all fired up." I called the police once again. They didn't charge him with violation of the protection order. Instead, they gave him an ordinance violation for disturbing the peace. The police told me that it seems like he's off his medication again, and that was that. They left. Last night, I was woken up by hammering outside my window at 1 a.m. He was cutting down his privacy fence horizontally. I called the police for a noise complaint, and they just told him to stop, and that was that. As I write this, he's outside continuing to horizontally cut down his privacy fence. That means the privacy fence only stands about 3 feet tall now. That fence was the one thing that made me feel relatively safe about hanging out in my backyard, and now it's gone. All of this is to say, I'm fucking tired. I just want to live in a house where I can be sure that my neighbor won't try to kill me, where I can feel confident that he's not trying to break in. My boyfriend and I are trying to buy a house and move, but it's difficult. I'm a PhD student, so I don't make much money. Renting won't work because I have 4 cats, and finding a place to rent with so much animals can be difficult, if not impossible. I refuse to rehome them, so maybe it's particularly my fault I'm stuck in this situation. My dad has agreed to co-sign another mortgage, and I've gotten a second job. We should be able to save up enough money within a few months, but until then, I'm stuck. I just don't know what else to do. I'm tired. I'm angry. So I figured I'd write this to vent.